ladies and gentlemen, I am BorderWise, and welcome back to From the Depths, and a double subscriber craft review, because I've been a naughty boy and I've been leaving people's ships, gathering dust on the shelf, and that's not good. So, as you probably have been able to tell, I've been away for over a week. It's been some time since my last vid. I am sorry about that. It was numerous things. I was really sick, so I couldn't speak. I was house-sitting, so I was away from my games computer for the most part. And yesterday, when I finally decided to get some recording done, I had work to do. So that's a bit of a bummer, but here I am now. We're recording, and we're not only doing a double ship review, we're doing a double battleship review, which is very nice indeed. And you'll immediately notice the difference between these two ships. Like, I have a policy, which is actually a good policy for reviewing anything, for critiquing anything, and I guess for life in general, is don't crap on people's work. I have no intention of doing that now, but I am going to be comparing and contrasting these two ships quite a bit, because the first one, this unpainted job right here, the Vanguard by Salmon, is what I would call a not novice work. If you want to, I guess, divide shipwrights into categories on From the Depths, this is apprentice level work. This is, okay, you've managed to build a big ship, but it needs some work. It needs quite a bit of work, because it could be a lot better. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. As opposed to the heavy main battleship Megashrek over here, by Harold Schroeder, aka Lily on Steam. This is journeyman or even expert, you could say, because it's more efficient, it's more put together, it's got way more active defenses, it's got just various cunning bits and pieces. It's got an interesting looking front, I just realized. Oh well. So in any case, I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible, because the problem with reviewing pretty much any ship, but especially big ones, is that there's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to try and get through this as efficiently as I can and try not to ramble too much. So we're just going to quickly read off the pros and cons of each ship and then go into more detail later. So the Vanguard. The pros are, it's got powerful guns, and lots of them. It's got an extremely tough hull. You can go through here, it's got layers of heavy armor, layers of metal. Good spacing as well, because you've got a layer here, layer here, layer here. So anything that is on here, let's turn this on, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Anything that's actually trying to aim for, like, the vulnerable lower parts of the turrets is going to have a very hard time of it. I'm trying to find where the ammo is. I knew where the ammunition was. I appear to have lost it. Where is it? And here I was saying that I wasn't going to ramble. I swear, I knew where the ammunition was. Don't tell me. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it is in this little citadel right here. And lots of armor, so anything that's actually bothering to aim for the ammunition is going to have a really hard time, because there's lots of hull in between it. And it's also got a cute helicopter up here, which is the Knight, not to be confused with the ship that Razul sent me, which is also called the Knight. This is adorable. I wish I could make things like this, even though its backside, no offense Salmon, its backside's really ugly, and it's got single wood blocks in it. No good. Okay, there is a long list of things that could be done better with the Vanguard, but before that, we're going to talk about what's nice about the Megashrek. We're going to start on a positive note and then tear both ships to bits. Slightly. Gently. In the most flattering manner possible. So, the Megashrek uses crams, which in my book already gets it a plus, because good on you for using crams, because they are the single, as much as I love them, they are the single worst weapon type in From the Depths, so, like, good on you, ballsy to use them. It looks cool, it's got a good paint job, I love the patterning on it, and in my fleet colors it looks especially cool. Very dark, very, I don't know, space age battleship kind of thing. It's got lots of missiles. Where are they? It had... yeah, here we go. It's got lots of missiles on the back. Lots and lots of them. It has a bunch of torpedoes. This thing actually, for a battleship, has quite a... well, it depends on what you define as a battleship, really. Where is the torpedo racks? I know they're around here somewhere. They're actually quite decently hidden. They might actually be concealed behind spin blocks now I think about it. Although I haven't noticed that before. Okay, where are you? You're making a fool of me. That's the missiles. And ammo. Torpedoes. Here they are. Big torpedoes, lots of torpedoes. High explosive and EMP, so that is how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 on the other side. That's a 20 torpedo volley, and these things are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 meters long. So that's a heck of a torpedo volley. Like, when I was testing this thing against the Naga, even the Naga was having trouble popping all the torpedo volleys, and the Naga has counter-torpedo turrets on the underside, 3 of them, and it also has a LAM system I stuck on some time ago, so this is a hefty torpedo volley. Gets through a lot of things. And I believe it also has counter-torpedo somewhere, according to my little list. Yes, it does, actually. No, wait, that's not it. What is this? What am I looking at? Where is it? I swear I saw it somewhere. Give me a moment. Is that it? No, it isn't it. I'm terribly sorry. I was meant to not ramble, and here I am trying to find bits of the ship that I should have found some time ago. But, c'est la vie, I guess. Maybe it's not counter-torpedoes. Maybe it's missiles it has. Yeah. Giving a good tour of its guts, anyway. Over here, if you would. And of course, I have both ships spawned in at the same time right now, which is not a good idea. I can't find them. I'm pretty sure they're around here somewhere. I've seen them. Unless I was getting them confused with the Naga's counter-torpedoes, in which case that is very embarrassing, and you should ignore me completely. Huh. Didn't know you could stick these underwater. Anyway. So, counter-torpedoes, maybe. It's got a PID system, so this thing does not sink easily. So long as it's got engine power, it's going to stay up, it's going to stay not rolled or anything like that. Steady. And it has smart turret design. Like, you will notice that pretty much every one of these turrets in the inside here is armored on the inside. So, well, almost. There's a gap or two, but Tetris. Sometimes you just got to make do. So, these turrets are not tremendously easy to pop. It can be done, but you pretty much have to hit them spot on. And I believe that the wonky, whatchamacallit, the explosion warping, in which explosion goes here, warps to the deck, and hits there, I think that's been fixed. I haven't noticed a tremendous amount of difference. But, well, except that the trebuchet is a lot harder to kill now, so that's annoying. So, this arguably isn't as necessary as it once was, but I still think it's a good idea, because anything that manages to get through the hull still has another layer of stuff to get through, so this is still a good idea, I think. Okay, so now, going over the basics of what I like. There's more than that, like, there's things to like about both of them. If nothing else, because you can tell what both of these shipbuilders were going for. And we'll go back to the Vanguard here, because there's... the reason I say this is kind of, I suppose, apprentice level, in, like, not by someone who's just, like, figuring out how to do things. Like, Salmon, it's been a month since you sent this in, so I'm gonna... if you've learned stuff since then, like, well then, good. But in any case, so, the first problem, like I mentioned, armored turrets are a good thing over on the Megashrek. You will notice that the Vanguard does not have that at all. And it also has a very skinny neck right here. So you see up here, there's just these two little poles up there, and that's basically what's connecting the turret cap to the turret itself. And that's dangerous because these things tend to get severed. Just for fragmentation or a pen depth round, Kit manages to get through this little pocket right here. And as you can see, it's like one... How many layers? That is... looks like 3 layers of metal here, so not invulnerable by a long shot. Especially if a Hesh round gets through here, it'll just go snip and take that right off. And I've seen that happen multiple times. So turrets are fragile, and also I've just remembered again, the Tetris could be better. These are big shell, these are quite big shell racks and autoloaders, so it's kind of hard to Tetris them around properly. But it is worth noting that, like, this is not very space efficient because, well, it's also dangerous because if this thing goes up, it's going to take this missile system along with it, so worth noting there. And what else? So basically, the trick with armor, I find, is not how much armor you have, it's whether it's in the right place. And this thing is actually over-armored in a lot of spots. You'll see there's heavy armor here, there, segments here, there, and everywhere. There's a little patch right here, which I think mainly, if I had to guess, I'd actually say that these little heavy armor bits are for aesthetics rather than anything else, except the heavy armor is a terrible thing to use for aesthetics because, well, it's heavy and it's really expensive. So yeah, that's not ideal, and you'll notice that down here, there's a lot of excess material. So here on the turrets, heavy armor, gap, 2 layers of metal, okay. But there's at certain points, I think around here. So yeah, right here, this seems excessive, and I know it's protecting an AI core, but it's just, there is such a thing as overdoing it. In fact, a lot of designs I've seen tend to overdo the heavy armor, and heavy armor is actually hard to use properly. The only advantage that a heavy armor beam has over 4 layers of metal is that it uses less space, and that's it. Like, using metal, for the most part, is cheaper, it's lighter, and it's easier to repair, and it also doesn't get damaged by EMP, so that's another advantage right there. And it's also much cheaper, so basically don't use heavy armor if you can get away with not using it. So right here, for instance. And this ship has a lot of empty space in it, a lot of wasted space, so, like, for instance, right here. This is a huge gap that basically is just for these ammo customizers. That's not ideal. You can do funky things with them. You can stick them up on walls or on ceilings or stuff like that, and you could basically turn this into something else. You could stick a LAM system on here, you could, and why is this here? There's just this wall of heavy armor here that doesn't really need to be there. So basically, efficient use of materials is just every block you place must ideally have a purpose as to what it's doing, and if you can't come up with a good reason for it being there, it probably shouldn't be there. Like this heavy armor beams, it's not going to do a hell of a lot to protect these, because any shells that manage to get through the deck or through the sides, explosions will just like wrap right around this wall, frags will bounce around all over the place, and it's just basically this shouldn't be here. There's no reason for it to be here that I can tell. And on that note, this thing is actually quite vulnerable to Hesh rounds, although honestly Hesh is a very powerful shell. It's hard to defend against. So on the hull, it has, in certain places, it has cunning use of spaced armor, so it has 2 layers of metal here, heavy armor, fragments do nothing, and also count against heat, but in other sections, it has very little. So where is it? Here, for instance. So here we have 3 layers of metal, which is not a barrier to Hesh at all. It'll just, the thump will go straight through this, and it will spray fragments all over the place. It'll shred this turret. And interesting. Oh no, please don't tell me. Yes it is. Here's another thing, you never want to put a turret directly on a weapon controller. I think these bigger turrets are also attached to the other blocks they're sitting on. But in general, it's not a good idea to put a fragile thing right below your turret, because if this gets destroyed, well, that's one, in this case, 1, 2, 3 less blocks holding your turret up. It's best to put it just underneath it by one, or on the turret itself. I prefer to put it on the turret itself, because it means you can just slap the turret around anywhere you like. So, that's nice. I should actually go sit on the Vanguard. There we go, it's got a little bridge right here. A little bit of Art Deco, remote terminals. Not this, I have to say, not the best looking bridge I've ever seen, but points for effort, because I usually never bother making these. So, what else? So, vulnerable to hash. Exposed propellers is another problem. And in particular, recently I've started experimenting with advanced cannon using ships. Haven't you made a prototype I'm happy with yet, I should mention, although I'm learning a lot and getting there. And in particular what I'm trying is sticking ammunition in the rear of a craft. The Vanguard doesn't do that, by the way. As you would have seen earlier, it's got its Vanguard... It's not its Vanguard. It's got its ammo in the Citadel, like on the center of mass, which is arguably not the best idea, even if it's well armored. But putting ammo in the back can be a good idea, because it screws with leading shots a lot, and it means that especially slower shells are going to have trouble leading the shot enough to hit. But what that means as well is that your propellers are at risk, because propellers are at the back, ammo's at the back, things always shoot at ammo first, pretty much, so your propellers are going to get shot off, which means that you do need to cover them right. In this particular case, since the ammo's not there, it's not a tremendous issue, but it's best to hide your propellers somehow. Like, one idea that is usually quite good, I've seen a number of people's ships do this, and it works very well, is to essentially put a shield in front of your propellers. Something like this. So, you have the propeller here, and let's do that. And the important bit is that the only bit of the propeller that needs to have clear space in front of it, at least 8 meters of it, is this central bit right here. The actual blades don't need that, go figure, from the depth physics. So what you can do is something like this. Doop, and doop. And you can also do this, boop, and boop. So what we have here is a propeller corridor, and as you can see, due to placement of the block, the force output is scaled by 1. You can essentially put an armored tail on this, and stops your propellers getting blown off quite as easily, because it means that shells hit this first, and they have to get through all this metal first. And particularly if it's a very long corridor, this is slightly excessive for something just jury-rigged. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just another one of these on the end would basically mean an explosion hitting here can't touch the propeller. So that's a generally good idea. The other way to do it, and I am going to just quickly... It's a metal block right there. I think that was meant to be there. Oh well. And will the game crash if I do this? Not if I do this. So, if I pull you lot out of play. The other thing you can do, and this is tooting my own horn slightly, is you can sling the propellers underneath the thing. So, here is the Naga. I'm just going to spawn this in quite quickly. Gave it a new paint job the other day, by the way. Do not lag to pieces. So, one way is to armor up your propellers, the other is to sling them underneath and string them out in a long line. And that way, it's harder for them for your ship to entirely lose propulsion. And Naga also has extra ones on the side, so this can be a good idea. Just to make sure that it's not putting all your propellers in one spot or all your eggs in one basket. So, okay, go away Naga, this video is not actually about you. And spawn you in Megashrek. And spawn you in... Actually, yeah, there we go. Boom. And let's just do this. Wait, no, let's do this. Okay, so long list. We're talking about the Vanguard a lot, and again, sorry, Salmon. This is like I'm ragging on your ship quite a lot, but it's for the greater good. Okay, so exposed propellers. It also has a weird rudder. That's the front of the ship. Whoops. Yeah, turning propellers are also exposed, also less ideal, especially since there's actually quite a bit of space inside to conceal them. So I'd recommend moving them inside. It also has a weird rudder right here. I have no idea if this actually works as intended. The Vanguard can steer properly, but that's partially because these things are like on the side here and they're set up correctly. So, oh hello, people are playing from the depths. So in any case, I've never seen this. I have no idea if this works at all. Logically, it shouldn't. But if someone in the comments knows if sticking the rudder pointing straight down is actually a good idea, like, let me know. But I've literally never seen this before. I'm not sure what you're up to, Salmon. Also bears mentioning the Vanguard also has a PID, which makes sense because the thing is incredibly heavy. So it'd be a little bit hard for it to just stay afloat with air pumps. And in fact, this thing, you'll see how low this thing is in the water. If this thing's hull gets breached, it tends to sink, rather alarmingly. So exposed propeller, weird rudder. The missiles on it are not optimized. In fact, the missiles hardly ever feature the picture when this thing is a fight. They tend to get blown up early, but that's not really what we're talking about. You want to, as far as I'm concerned, this is no different than when I first learned of it. Fins have the most drag out of anything, so they should go on the back to keep the missile fast. And you should always stick your warheads together because the explosion is localized. So here, I don't... This is a big missile as well, because... Not because... Thing. And there's no reason for more than one turn. That is... I've just seen that now. There's absolutely no reason. That is completely redundant. You don't need that. So, missiles need tweaking. And the guns aren't optimized as well. This is a common mistake, mostly because it's just an easy thing to overlook. The required accuracy before fire. Never leave these on the default settings because the AI is dumb enough with aiming as it is. So you pretty much always want to turn this down here. The one exception for that is missile controllers, because missiles can guide themselves towards the target. With guns, you definitely want to turn this down here. So, what else? This thing, these little guns on the side here, also need to do that. This ship relies slightly too heavily on frag, which means that against something that doesn't have double layer shields, it does pretty well. But against something which does, it tends to suffer quite a lot. And also, I've just noticed these frag warheads, you should really put a frag head on them, because that's more aerodynamic. It means the shell has better range and speed. But that's like a recent addition, relatively recent addition from the depth, so easy to overlook. And there are kind of just weak points all over the show. So if we look in here for a second. Lots of stuff. So right here, for instance, we have this exposed turret and lots of armor on the sides, lots of armor lower down. Right here, there's only one layer of metal. And there's kind of these little weak points all over the ship. And remember, it's a good idea with building ships, you do need to put your armor in the place that an enemy is likely to be shooting at. But at the same time, you want to keep your important bits well protected. And this is a major weak point. Like, it doesn't particularly take strong explosive shells to get through one layer of metal. And once they do, they have one layer of metal and they're in the turret neck. So that is a little bit of an issue, and it's kind of these little weak points all over. And back to get the heavy armor problem. Heavy armor it does not play well with other materials when put next to each other, so this is not a good place to put heavy armor. Like, as I said before, this might very well just be decorative, but still not a good idea, because heavy armor, just because it is so much tougher than every other material, when it gets hit, the more fragile material around it tends to get blown apart or shredded, which means that you end up with gaping holes in your hull anyway. And I just got messaged. So, hang on, Needles. Hang on, I'm just gonna probably edit this out. Boarding. Now, please use me. Okay, what was I talking about? Ah, yes, so heavy armor is best done strategically. You need to basically make a party package of it. You need to wrap a small important thing in it. It doesn't do well just placed like this, because these metal blocks will get destroyed long before these do, and then, well, that's kind of it, really. The enemy shells are inside your ship, and that's game over. What else? This thing. And this might come as a surprise coming from me, but ships this big and this slow, a LAM system is a good idea. Like, I hate myself for saying that, because as anybody who watches my channel regularly should know, I hate LAM systems. They are overpowered as knobs, and I wish we had more balanced alternatives to them. But for now, they are extraordinarily good at stopping incoming big shells and missiles. And big shells are exactly what these big ships are vulnerable towards. Crams have a field day shooting at things like this. So a LAM system is a good idea, and this ship does have the space for it, and it wouldn't be hard to get the extra engine power for it as well. It has a lot of engine power too. It has like 26,000, and you could easily put some more engines in there. And what else? This thing also tends to get blinded easily. So we've got detection up here, little exposed coincidence rangefinders. We have visual camera that it can't see out very well. So this is a 360 camera. At this point, it would be actually a better idea just to stick in a 90-degree camera, which admittedly isn't good, or even just a 90-degree radar. So like this, because then it can see out and it's not as inefficient. And you'll notice the 360 ones are actually a little bit more expensive than the 90-degree ones, and they're also got worse detection settings, so not ideal. And same thing down here, you don't want to stick a 360 detection unit down here because it can't see right, it can't see backwards, and it can't see forward, so it's pretty much only facing that way. There's no point to putting a 360 detector down there. Unless you put it on a spin block, in which case it can see straight through the ship. That's a little bit cheaty though. So, I do notice this ship does tend to get blinded easily, partially because a lot of the detection is around here. And remember where the ammunition is, it's somewhere around here as well. In fact, it's here, here, here. Nah, AI components there. So it does tend to get blinded a little bit. That's the third time I said that, I should say. And this thing is also quite poorly shielded, and I will demonstrate that off right now. Stick a water.
Turning off.
Okay, so you see the shields are right here. And that's about it. Like, there's no shields covering the guns, there's no shields covering the superstructure. And I can understand that because I hate placing shields. It's a tremendous pain in the butt. And yeah, it's just... But really, once you start making ships these expensive, incidentally this thing is really expensive, it's almost $500,000 material cost, you really do want to get active defenses on it really well. We're talking LAMs, shields, CIWS guns, just like counter-missile stuff like that, because those things are cheaper in the long run than armor. And it's also a lot easier, because at the end of the day, ammunition is cheaper than your hull, so, worth noting. And that's about it for the Vanguard, like, long ragging on it. Didn't even talk about the Knight, but, well, tiny little thing. But, yeah, so this is what I think of when I think of like an apprentice level ship. It's someone who's figured out the core mechanics of the game and is kind of just trying to make something, well, big and cool. And kudos to that, because if you don't build, you don't learn. Also, I should have mentioned, heavy barrels, don't use them unless you absolutely have to, because they are heavy and they slow down your turret speed a lot. But I guess, enough ragging on the Vanguard, it's time to rag on the Megashrek. Now, good news is, it's a much shorter list for the Megashrek, because, as I said, I'll just straight up say, it is more competently put together. If I had to guess, I'd say Harold has spent a bit more time from the depths than Salmon, which is absolutely fine. It's inevitable that that happens. I look at other people's design and think, what the hell, how they do that? So, what does this ship do right that the Vanguard doesn't? Well, there's a few things. One of it is that, I've mentioned before, it's armored sensibly, and it's got more active defenses, it's got lambs, and incidentally, these little guns on the side are combination CIWS and just regular guns. So this, we should be able to see. Makes it tick. So yeah, there it is. There is an anti-missile controller, and I believe it does not have. I think these ones are pure CIWS. Oh well, or Swiss, I guess you could call them. Swiss guns. Hey, I just came up with a name for it. Okay, maybe not hybrid, but yeah, still. Maybe these ones are hybrid. Or, ugh, my throat's getting dry. What are you doing? Interesting Tetris, and aha! I like it. Interesting. Yeah, it has smoke guns as well, so that's to help the crams do their job. That is page straight out of the book I like to quote from, so that's good. Okay, so what does this thing do wrong, I should get onto? Well, it actually does something similar to the Vanguard over here. You will notice the Vanguard has heavy armor on the turret caps. So does the Megashrek. That, I tend to find that's usually a waste of time, because the main point of a turret cap is to keep your gun alive. So, how do you keep your gun alive? Well, the smarter thing to do for the most part is to keep the turret cap as small as possible, which is really hard, particularly if you're like me and you'd like to stick gauge increases and detection equipment on them. It's a bit of a hassle, but it's usually better to keep it small and hard to hit rather than heavily armored. Because what happens if you get a big mean cramshell whistling in and it hits here, like right on this this indestructible heavy armored? What's going to happen is it's going to blow the gun barrels off, and once it hits here, the explosion will sneak in and just gut the thing from the inside. And in my testing, not just with this ship, but in other ships like it that have heavy armor turret caps, what tends to happen is that, like, during a fight, the turret cap will be fine. The stuff it's supposed to be protecting is destroyed and gone. Like, right down into the actual turret itself. In particular, if you go through the sides here, so multi-layers of metal, the hull is actually weaker than the turret cap, and that's no bloody good. Because the thing is more likely to get hit in the hull than in the cap. You want the hull to be the thing protecting the turret, not the turret itself, with the exception of the turret armor. That makes no sense. Basically, keep your heavy armor off your turret. It doesn't really help. In particular, these guns right here, because they're so much smaller, and because I think explosion warping is still kind of a thing. An explosion will hit here, it will destroy all this, and then it will sneak straight down here and blow this up anyway. I've seen that happen multiple times. These little guns do have a habit of getting blown off. And another thing to mention is, if you want to make a double turret, keep in mind that the weapon control... Oh, single blocks right here. Naughty, don't do that. Use 2-meter blocks. Your computer... My computer will love you for it. Should bear mentioning that... What the hell was I going to say? Okay, so... The weapon controller way down there on the turret is stupid and will aim both these guns the same way. And you might think, how is that a problem? These guns are the same length, they're the same muzzle velocity and accuracy and all that stuff. Not when they get damaged. Often what happens in a fight is that one gun will get, like, one barrel will get sheared off by an explosion or frag. And when that happens, the gun is essentially useless, because then it'll start aiming with the less accurate gun, as in the shorter barrel, which means, often means that one shot will undershoot the target by a long way, and the other will overshoot. And the way to avoid doing that, I'm going to send the Vanguard off, I'm going to spawn in the Naga again, and again, I should mention, I'm not just trying to show off my ship here. The Naga has a host of problems, starting with the fact that it's, well, it's a bit of a repair hog. So the counter to that is this. You stick a weapon controller between the two turrets, because then, rather than just one weapon controller down at the bottom controlling everything, this weapon controller will control each of these as separate weapons, which means each turret, each gun will elevate correctly and will still be on target. And that makes a huge difference. It means even if this, like, one barrel gets sheared off almost entirely and the other one doesn't, it means it still has a chance to hit the target, which is very helpful because hitting the target is a good thing, bluntly speaking. Let's actually sit on the Megashrek. It's worth mentioning that the Megashrek, the bridge still isn't particularly sexy, but if you turn around, hey Jack, that's a nice touch. I like that. It has doors and stuff. You go out here. I guess, I don't know, a paint job inside here and some lights or something probably wouldn't hurt. I like how the control blocks are set up here. Like real control block-ish thing. I know how to speak English, shut up. Is this single blocks? No, it isn't. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's keep ragging on it because we're on a roll here. It's got... Where is it? Is this what I think it is? That is flak. That is a flak round. That is not what I'm after. It is... Aha! These guns here. Okay, so I should mention that these little, I guess, secondary guns on the fore and after the ship I'm quite fond of because they're actually quite good. 200mm and rather big shells, actually. They got... It's hybrid... high explosive frag, so quite good. The one problem is that these fragment cones are very tight. And remember that, like, I only received this thing a month ago, so what's probably the case is that the ship was being built before the frag changes. That's one possibility. It bears mentioning that the lower this angle is, the less damage each fragment will do. Admittedly, 74 is still pretty impressive, but if you turn it up to 60, it does 85. It does all that. I don't know. It does tend to shred anything that's not well armored in its way. But yeah, I think it's especially since this has a timed fuse, I would, if I were you, Harold, I would set this up just a little bit higher. I would set, I don't know, 30 or something like that. Also, just to make sure that each frag actually does something. But, like, I don't know, there still could be, like, niche uses for, like, really tight angle fragmentation. It's just, for the most part, it's, like, these days it's better to err on the side of higher rather than lower. Yeah, what else? What else? I was gonna say poor cram accuracy, but it's like, it's possible the detection settings aren't quite up to snuff in terms of crams, because it does tend to miss a lot. But I guess not. So the crams do tend to miss, but that's mainly because, and this is going to skip ahead a little bit. No, I know why this is. The coincidence rangefinders are backwards. So this is less ideal. These, especially these big coincidence rangefinders, have very good bearing detection, and you want to make sure they're actually facing the target properly. So backwards, well, you know what to do. Need to fix. And that does throw off the accuracy of these main guns in particular. And what else? Talking about the cram Tetris, so let's save this right here. here. I'm just going to rudely stick this on the deck, like so. And we're going to do this. This is quite a tall turret, actually. Again, lots of heavy armor, not ideal. So this is not ideal Cram Tetris because it has... It's 4x4, it's a standard 4x4 kind of Tetris setup. You don't want your explosive pellets... Well, any pellets really, but you don't want your explosive pellets on the outside. Firstly, because they're more likely to get blown up, and secondly, because this pellet right here is only attached to 2 connectors. You don't want that. These things are too expensive to just spam all over the place. Really, you want 4-way connections on pretty much every explosive pellet you have. So this one right here, this is good, this is not so good. And well, the reason for that is that there is a metal beam right in the middle here that is not actually ideal. It is possible to Tetris, like, to the point where you actually use all the space in the gun. Admittedly, the local weapon controller is here in the middle. So that kind of put a screw on that. The way I tend to build guns is I tend to build the turret block and I tend to put this thing just behind it. And then the whole gun just kind of sits on top of it and you can fill in, like, the underneath with something else entirely. So... yeah, so the Tetris could be better, and there are ships available in the workshop which have really good trenches. Particularly look for anything by a welder. Hi, a welder, how's it going? And just, I wonder if Forum 4 has things on the workshop. I haven't checked, but there are some cram geniuses out there, and it's worth checking out how they do their Tetris. So, what else? Okay, the other thing, and this is best done by example rather than anything else, is that the Megashrek has a habit of driving off into the middle distance. This is, yep, detection issue already. And you'll get to see that both these ships have their issues, but the Vanguard does have a good volley. That unfortunately tends to miss, because I forgot to mention its shells are quite slow. Those CWS guns are actually doing a pretty good job. Wow, those CIWS, those Swiss guns, actually are really good. They're popping things from a long way away. So the Vanguards are actually doing a little bit better than usual, and that's because I do indeed believe that the Megashrek is aiming for the ammo that is behind way too many layers of armor. But as you can see, armor only does so much. Wow, frags sound different when they're slow. Oh, yeah, that's what I was talking about. Armor your turrets, people. Otherwise you get flying battleships, and they are a public health and safety hazard. And you'll notice that the Megashrek is driving way off into the middle distance. Oh yeah, forgot to tell you how much the Megashrek costs. It's around 330,000. Actually, how's the health going? The Megashrek is winning. And the Vanguard is doing poorly. And so what I was pointing out before by how vulnerable the turrets are, those weak points, case in point, right here, that's what happens. And especially considering that, remember, missiles are still something you have to worry about occasionally. And missiles don't care where your ammo is stored. They will hit all over the place. And especially with advanced guns as well, the shells tend to bounce off the water and go all over the place. Oh yeah, and firing restrictions are also a thing. Put them on your guns. As you can just see right there, there's some sensors that managed to get popped off. There's time to use crams for you. So I'm probably not going to let this fight run all the way through, but you can probably tell that the Megashrek is 1,000 meters away and the distance is growing. It tends to run away from its opponents a lot. Let's go over and see how the Megashrek's doing. See, big torpedo volley, big torpedo volley. Also, another reason not to rely too much on... completely forgot to mention this. The Vanguard also has crams, but they're underwater, so they're almost useless. They can't aim properly. And these little guns right here, especially in situations like this, I think the firing, their range restrictions is a bit too much, because you can tell they're not firing at all right now, partially because the angle's wrong, but also because they're out of range. So this is not a ship designed for anything other than really short-range combat. And that's not a good idea, because you don't always have precise control over where your ships are. That looked painful. Let's go see the Megashrek. And this is the big advantage in active defenses, because I don't think a single missile from the Vanguard has managed to hit the Megashrek. Actually, what's happened with you? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Megashrek is falling in the water. Interesting. So, to conclude, I suppose both these ships need work. Just the occasional bit of work. Overall, the Megashrek is a all-round better built ship, but it's easy to tell that Harald is a more experienced ship designer, so do not despair, Salmon. Keep going, just make sure that, I don't know, you can tweak the Vanguard if you like, just make sure you put, well, make sure you do this, make sure you just, I don't know, try looking at other big ships and see how well they work. In particular, try and look at things like Steel Strider's godly vessels, things like the Tur or the Bull Shark. And as you can see right now, partially due to EMP and partially due to frag, these guns are now blind. They're aiming weird. So this fight is pretty much over at this point. And oh my god. Okay, so I hope this was a video that was helpful, entertaining, enlightening. Me reviewing ships that were sent in a month ago and I should have gotten to earlier, with excessive amounts of lag. So, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you next time in From the Depths. Farewell!